Hello and welcome everybody to the YOPD Council, our first one of 2021. Very exciting to be back. My name is Melanie Dizon. I'm the Director of Education and Research at the Davis Phinney Foundation, and we're really excited to have you all here today. For those of you who are brand new, I just want to give you a quick little intro to this panel. We decided to create this council last year, and I think we have probably done maybe six sessions. We do them once a month. And if you are here and registered, it means that you will always get the recording and the link and any of the resources that we share on the council. I'm going to introduce you to our members. We have many standing members who are usually with us every month. And then sometimes we have guests, and we have a guest today, which is exciting. So Tom, you can wave and say hello. Tom is one of our standing members, also an ambassador. Erin, hello, Erin. She's also an ambassador. Amy is an ambassador, and she is in Pennsylvania. Gaynor is calling in from England. So it's it's like 8 where you are. Is that right? Or 9? Brad is joining us today. He's going to be talking about career. He's done a lot of research around this topic, so it's going to be really exciting to hear some of the research he's been working on. Kat Hill is joining us, and she's from Oregon. Kevin Kwok is here, and he is a standing member. He's also one of our board of directors, and he is from Boulder, down the street. And Heather, hello, Heather is calling in, and she is a regular member of the YOPD Council, and she's also going to be a regular member of the Women's YOPD Council that is starting the first week of February. As a little quick tutorial, if you've never been on Zoom before, if you click the little icon at the bottom that says chat, it'll pop up in the right-hand side, and you can send us messages. If you want to send a question to me and to everybody here and everybody listening in, then you want to pick panelists and attendees on the right-hand side. There's a little blue bar, and there's a little arrow at it. If you click it, you'll see all the different ways that you can communicate. If you don't want the rest of the main audience to see your question, then please just hit panelists, and then we'll be the only people who see it. And you can also directly message me. So if you just pick my name or just pick host, you'll be able to do that. We will take questions at the end, so feel free to ask questions and I will filter through those. We may or may not answer them as you ask them. But if it's relevant and somebody sees it, we might do that. So just know that we are keeping track of it, and I'm watching it the whole time, and I'm happy to respond to anything that I can. Lee is in the background, and she is with the Davis Phinney Foundation, and she is the best at providing all the links. So it's amazing. Somebody will say something, and then less than 4 seconds later, she'll have the link up. So look out for that. And again, we'll share all of those with you later. I think that's it. So I'm going to pass it over to Tom. They've spent a lot of time putting this one together. Really excited to hear what everybody's going to say. So go for it, Tom.
Thanks, Mel, and welcome everybody, and welcome to the panelists and of course all of you out there. This is something that everybody has to deal with at some point in time, whether you're young onset or not. But it really applies well to mostly to young onset Parkinson's patients, because of it happens when we're at either still working or at a point where we need to make some major life changes. And so this is entitled How to Change Careers and Find More Meaning on Your Current Path. So in other words, how do you change your direction once you're diagnosed, and if that's necessary right away, and that type of thing. And as well, maybe you're going to keep on working, or whatever that entail for you, and how to create better meaning or more meaning on that existing path. So joining us again today is Brad McDaniels. He's an assistant professor at the Department of Rehabilitation and Health Services at the University of North Texas. And prior to joining them, Brad earned his PhD from the University of Kentucky in rehabilitation counseling, and subsequently accepted an advanced rehabilitation research and training postdoctoral fellowship appointment with the focus on Parkinson's disease in the Department of Physical Medicine and Rehabilitation at Virginia Commonwealth. So Brad's going to provide sort of a very scientific if you will, background or base for us, foundation, as we attack some of the questions that we had posted on the internet that invited you to this class or this seminar, sorry. I first asked a few of our panel members to talk about their journey down this road from being diagnosed and what might have happened with them and how they've addressed this topic of changing your career or finding more meaning. And I'd like to first invite Kat to talk about her experiences.
Thanks, Tom. Happy New Year, everybody. I was diagnosed at the age of 48. At that time, I was working as the director of a busy inner city midwifery service. Our practice delivered about 60 babies a month. And I was doing 24-hour call, and also half of my appointment was administrative. So I had needed really good multitasking skills and a little bit of superhuman energy to get through my 24-hour call shifts. And I hadn't been feeling well for some time, and I left work without a diagnosis, actually, and didn't ever go back. So I left, went through the diagnostic process, went out on short-term disability, and decided that for me, it was the best choice to kind of sunset out what I was doing and look for ways that I could better take care of myself. I didn't think that I could manage the demands and manage effectively parenting teenage children, caring for aging parents, and working a full-time job. So that was my decision. And I actually went out on short-term disability and ultimately long-term disability and Social Security disability. Since then, I've sort of reinvented myself and have done a lot of volunteer work in what I call my Act 2. And I'm not going to get too much into that, but it took some time. It took some real grief. It took some healing, but I moved on. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell.
Thanks, Kat. And Amy, if you'd like to give us your background and your story, that'd be great.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed at age 48, just like Kat, on a Friday. And the first person I told after my family was my boss on a Monday. I am a faculty member at a university, and I, the first response that I had to the diagnosis with regard to my future employment, I felt was panic, as I'm sure that many people feel. And I was lucky in that I met people right away, very quickly after the diagnosis, who were 5 years or 10 years along their PD journey, who were still working. And they met with me, we had lunch, and that really helped me move from panic to planning. And I think that it's really, really important to see other people who are still working and still fully engaged. And then when you get to planning, that's where the work comes in. And so I ended up 5.5 years later, I'm still working full time as a faculty member. And I had contacted a career coach early on, a career coach who specialized in chronic illness. There are actually a lot of people out there who do that. And that led me to get interested in building my own career coaching practice. So I've been doing that for the past 4 years on the side and learning about the discipline and all the resources out there. And it's been really interesting and helpful. And I'm still going. So I decided to do that on the side, both because I wanted to help people and also because I wanted something that I could transition into if and when I could no longer work my full-time job. So for me, it was a lot about risk management. Like, I needed a plan A and a plan B. And I'm happy to talk more about my story as well for after we talk through somebody else's.
Thanks, Amy. That's really interesting because 48 must be the magic number. I was 48 when I was diagnosed as well. So
yeah, all the cool kids are
about that. Yeah. Kevin, I asked Kevin to talk as well, and I'm really excited that he did. And Kevin's experiencing what we're talking about today in real time. So Kevin, I'm like to have you talk
Thanks,
about it.
Tom. Well, I guess I'm going to join you all in the 48 Club because I was also diagnosed at age 48. So I've been a lifelong pharmaceutical biotech executive. It's the only thing I know. I'm a very simplistic kind of guy. But I had all these grand aspirations of either one day being, in the C-suite, maybe even running a biotech company. And it was interesting when I was first diagnosed back at 48, I went through more of a denial period where it was like, it's not that bad. I'm doing fine. I can still work my way through things. And through the course of admitting it over time, I was able to adjust and course correct my career trajectory to sort of fit the disease and be able to work. And so I don't know what the average lifespan of people who continue working is on this panel, but I've been working almost now for 13 years post-diagnosis. But with different roles and diminishing returns, I will mention. And I think that one of the things that my neurologist at Stanford said to me is, Kevin, she goes, Parkinson's disease is a disease that it's the curse of the type A personality. She goes, for all of you, she goes, I see the pattern, right? You all have a certain thing that you're very driven by, either career or in rest. You're the kind of people that go on vacation that have to do things every single minute, right? And her comment to me was, you got to step back and actually smell the roses. Well, I ignored that comment, right? On there like a typical type A. That was for other people, but that wasn't for me. And unfortunately, my carousel came to a stop 3 months ago. Some of you may have heard in previous talks that I've given how I've been able to reinvent myself from different operating roles to support roles to even patient advocacy roles. And some of you have heard me say I had the best job in the world at the very end of my career, which was the ability to talk to patients and hear their stories. So as I tell everyone, I reinvented myself with Parkinson's and turned my hobby into a full-time job, right? Well, two months ago, I was informed that, Kevin, it's not working. It's that one call that you just dread. And I was fortunate enough that my employer said, we can work on a slower exit, with you and counsel you out. But I have to tell you that the last 2 months have been the hardest of my life. I mean, it's such a blow to take away the lifeblood of people who only think about work as their well-being. And some of you will have also heard me talk about some of my interactions with the sex doctor, Dr. Ruth Westheimer. She happened to be a house guest of mine at one time. And she said to me, Kevin, she says, she was very intrigued because I was a headhunter. And I used to help people in healthcare find jobs. And she goes, you don't realize that, especially in the case of men, she says, if you take away jobs, you take away self-worth. And she had just published in Forbes an article called The Bedroom Recession. And she says, everything affects the way your work affects everything you are. And so for me, I've been going through this sort of realization that this Parkinson's robbing one of your relevance. That's another term that I use. I feel like now I've really hit the wall and relevance has been robbed. But I think that what I'm hoping through my conversations with others on this panel is redefining what relevance really is. It's not necessarily a pay stub. It's not necessarily a job title, but I'm in search right now of that new relevance.
Right on, Kevin. Thanks very much. So we're going to migrate into another part of the session here. And this is where we're going to get Brad more involved. And we have 4 topics that we wanted to bring to your attention that are kind of pivotal to walking through this or this part of our Parkinson's journey. So Brad, if you could help us evaluate how our careers might look through a Parkinson's lens, let's start with that. And from there, we can get the feedback from our panelists.
Yeah, I'd be glad to. And thank you all, Mel, for the opportunity to come on here. This is exciting to me. And just as a little background, Parkinson's.
Hang on one second, Brad. Your voice is a little muffled. I'm not sure.
I'm sorry, is this better?
That's better.
Okay, sorry about that. Parkinson's is personal to me. You know, my mother was diagnosed almost 9 years ago now, and that was my impetus for going back to graduate school. So I went back late in life and got my PhD with the sole focus of how can I help people with PD. So just a little background about me. And, you know, as we think about this, what we've heard from the 3 panelists evaluating one's career at diagnosis, you know, the one common denominator that I heard was fear, right? Fear of the unknown. What's next? Do I have to tell my employer that I have PD? If I do, what do I say? How do I disclose? And the quick answer to that is no, right? We don't have to tell. The only time that you really need to tell an employer that you have a chronic illness is if you are going to ask for accommodations on your job. Obviously, then you need to disclose to them. And one of the things that I talk to groups about regularly is what does disclosure look like, right? How do we go about that? And it's really, in a nutshell, talking about what are the things that will functionally impact your job and what can be done about it. So I think that as someone on here who may be thinking about this, who may be experiencing this right now, those are some things to think about. What do I need that will help me perform my job to the best of my ability? And if you choose to disclose, be honest about it. And I guess probably the one good piece of advice is talk in layman's terms, right? You all know the medical terms that are associated with Parkinson's disease. Many employers, if you say dyskinesias, they're not going to have any idea what you're talking about. So tell them things in their language that will impact your work. And I think that you'll find the response will be very different in doing that.
Thanks. Anybody want to comment on that or have anything to add, Amy?
Yeah, I've done a lot of research about this too, and there are some really good free services. And I know Brad works with some of those vocational rehabilitation organizations, but there's also a nonprofit / government, it's kind of like a quasi-government organization called AskJan, the Job Accommodation Network is what JAN stands for. It's askjan.org, and it's staffed by people who are social workers and I think lawyers and other professionals who have been working with in this area of accommodations for a really long time. And when you call them, they are so helpful and they are so experienced, and they treat everything confidentially, and they will talk you through exactly what Brad's talking about. You know, do I have to disclose? How do I disclose? What can I ask for? What's the timing? And they'll even give you sort of like a template for the letter that you need to write. It's a really, really good resource.
And what I found kind of interesting was meeting Brad as we started to prepare this webinar was, man, I wish I would have known these things then that I'm learning here now. So that's been really kind of an interesting point. So I think for me, it was about looking at what really could I do from this point on. And I worked for about another 8 years after being diagnosed. And then it just came to a point where it was obvious to me and my boss, who was really good and easy to deal with on this whole exercise, in that part of my journey. And so it was pretty obvious that it was time that I stepped down. So that kind of, I played an active role in that whole thing. And that's kind of what I always encourage people to do is, talk to your employer. If you're on those terms, some people just aren't on good terms with their employers. And I realize that's kind of difficult. So I don't know if anybody on the panel had anything, experiences like that they'd like to comment about, but if you do.
I think that the comment that you had, Tom, on doing it on your own terms is the thing that we all wish we could do. Not everyone has that luxury. We're not all co-founders. We work in bigger organizations with other people. But I think part of this disclosure is the hopes that you'll get a champion within your company that will help you navigate through the next steps. And that's not always the case for everybody out there. So I think that's the challenge, right?
Definitely.
Gaynor, did you want to jump in there?
Gaynor, you're muted.
There you go.
Fingers don't work. I think that's the double-edged sword behind it, isn't it? That you want to keep working, or you're fighting with this contradiction that you want people to understand your condition, and at the same time you want to be as normal as ever.
Right.
So I think an awful lot of people are stuck, and you want a champion, you want someone within your business who's going to understand your condition, but then that involves you coming out about it properly.
Yeah, the phrase that I use, Gaynor, is that when you have Parkinson's, you don't fake your illness, you fake your wellness. You tell people everything's okay, and you volunteer. You take on more than you really should probably do. And I think it's a double-edged sword that also comes back to bite you by living that world as well.
It's that type A personality again, isn't it, Kevin? The type A personality is not going to say, I can't actually do this.
No,
and maybe
that's
you
right.
should sometimes, or you have to monitor your own health and your own what's good for you, and those stress levels certainly are not good for you.
My guess is everyone on this panel has a hard time saying no.
It's a hard thing to learn.
I also think that it takes the ability to ask for help. And I think that may be something else that for me, it would have meant having to ask my partners to step up and do more. And we couldn't just leave labor and delivery not covered. So I just couldn't do it. I couldn't see myself doing it and asking the question.
Yeah, I wanted to add too, from my own personal career perspective, I did switch jobs after I was diagnosed, but went into a similar field, just at a different company. And I'm thankful that the company that I work at is a B certified core company, or B Corps certified company. So it's a new movement across the globe where to become B Corps certified, you have to adhere to a certain level of social responsibility and environmental responsibility. So part of that my company does, it includes ADA type of things. So they've been very open with me and dialoguing with me about what my needs are, almost to the point where I'm canceling meetings with them because they're over accommodating me at this point, which is great. But just from a thought perspective, if you are looking to switch careers, they do have a listing out for all the companies that have been B Corps certified or are working towards it. And they are, I think, a little more, I don't want to say open to working with people with disabilities amongst other things, but they definitely approach it from a different perspective.
Did Heather jump in?
I just did some research. I vet sources for a living for my other job. And I just did research on B companies to verify that the companies listed in the article were B companies, and I got a whole education. So thank you for doing that. The sustainability alone is lifting the vibration and changing the workplace. It's really a dynamic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I've got a great company, no complaints.
Yeah. Congratulations. I wanted to
Thank
also
you.
echo what Brad said about the translations needed to come out in your workplace. When I tell people I have Parkinson's, they're like, you're so young. Or if I start a dialogue where they can't see who I am, they immediately assume that I'm over the age of 70 and they start talking from that point, which is always kind of tricky because I look at the career path much as I do the dating world. We want to be healthy and vibrant and show our best side, but we also might need disability. And so we don't want to leave out the reality that we are really increasingly disabled. And that reality is very real. And it's hard to show that on camera. It's hard to be vulnerable. And I've made my last 10 years about showing that transparent part of me. That hasn't always gone well. You know, showing that transparency online requires a lot of bravery. You have to be bulletproof. People are going to come at you. You're going to be shot at from every grassy knoll, whether you're showing your good side, like how, hey, today I can box, I'm so happy, or I can barely do this. So we want to get hired, but then we also might not be able to do everything. So it's a really tough line to walk. And Brad mentions, you know, translating that to your employers is so important, and engaging and being your own advocate. Kevin mentioned that we want somebody to stand up for us. We might not always get that, and that we can't count on it. We have to find ways to be our own advocate in that. So I just want to add all that. Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thanks,
that's a very
Heather.
good
Awesome.
point. That's a very good point, Heather. I think it's difficult for companies and organizations, regardless of where you work, and your coworkers to understand that your symptoms vary from day to day. It just doesn't make sense to them, you know, and you can fall into the whole catty bit. Well, she was fine yesterday. What's their problem today? Why can't you? And it's a lack of understanding. And we just have to look at those situations as learning experiences for the other people, and try, as much as it hurts you and rips your heart out as it's happening to you, try to educate somebody on the reality of your situation and remind them how thankful they should be that they're not in your shoes.
For sure. Hey, Brad, can you start us off on how to evaluate new ideas?
Yeah, I just want to add one more piece to the previous discussion that comes up from time to time when I'm talking to patient groups is don't bring up ADA when you're talking about your accommodations, right? Because frequently people will have the mindset that, yes, I have this protection under the ADA, and I'm going to tell my employer or my HR person they have to comply because of the ADA. That's a touchy subject, right? We know what the law says, but there are ways around that. And it's a great way to begin the conversation in a very negative tone. So I always throw that out there because we just don't want to make that mistake up front. But so evaluating the new ideas, right? We've heard some already from the panelists about how diagnosis comes, you're kind of making those decisions about, do I remain in my current work setting, or is it time to change? You know, if I work in construction and I'm having gait issues, it may be time that I find a different occupation, right? That's safer for me to work. And one of the things that, again, as I share with many groups, that's available is the Office of Vocational Rehabilitation. And a whole lot of patient groups have never heard of this. And it's a fantastic organization that's around in every state. It's federally funded. It's operated in each state. And it is an office that's designed to help people with chronic illnesses and disabilities through the process of finding work. And that's a very broad definition, because what do? They help with interview skills, assessments to find out what your interests might be, what your skill set is to help you choose a different job. They will help with assistive technology if you need some help with something. They will help with accommodations. So it's a wonderful organization. And I forwarded on a link to Mel that they can probably put in the chat as a way to find who your Voc Rehab office is in every state. And it's AskEarn, ASKEARN. And it's a wonderful resource to sit down and talk with one of these professionals. And this is what they do. They understand disabilities, they understand chronic illnesses, and they can help answer questions. You know, you guys are such a tremendous resource. And, you know, I would bet that based on what Tom said earlier, having had some of this information at the time of diagnosis would have been invaluable. And so the hope is that some who may be on here who haven't gotten to the point where you all are on the panel can use this. And it's another piece for you all to have in your tool bag. When someone asks you, you can say, hey, have you reached out to the Office of Voc Rehab or not? And so I always want to share that as you're evaluating ideas, because they're great to bounce things off about, here's my skill set that I have in my current job. How might that translate to something else? Is it possible for me to change jobs, or what do I need to do to stay in my current role? Just a few thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks. I think some of what impacts that, of course, is really the bottom line, which in most cases money.
Yeah.
And I thought we talked about this before the meeting, before this presentation, about, how do we deal with that 800-pound gorilla in the room, having to have an income and some way to sustain yourself. So I don't know if you guys on the panel have comments about that, but I'm sure some of you do.
Yeah, so the diagnosis, the work after the diagnosis is really important. And I think it involves both external and internal work. And the external work has to start with an honest assessment of your financial situation, because any decisions after that necessarily depend on that first one. And I do think that if you start moving forward, thinking about what you want to do without taking that first step of this sort of really honest inventory, that can lead to more anxiety, because you don't know if those things that you are now evaluating are even feasible. So it's a really hard thing to do. And there are lots of decisions that you have to make because of whatever your assessment comes out to be. But if you do it, and I think Kat talks about this too, if you do it, from there, you can have a little bit more peace of mind about what your options are. And I want to echo what everybody's saying, is I think it's really, really important to not see yourself as a victim in this process. That it's really important to feel like you have some agency and some ownership and some control over what you can control, because you cannot control the fact that you have Parkinson's. That's a given. So the question is, right, given that I have Parkinson's, what are my options now? And it's really difficult to move forward if you feel like things are just happening to you and you don't have any choices. Choices are not going to be the ones that you want, but they are choices. And I do think it's really important to sort of find your power in this inquiry.
Yeah, I'd love to echo that, Amy, that I think sometimes when you're in the throes of just getting a diagnosis, it's probably not the best time to make the really big decisions. If you can take a little bit of time and feel all the feels and then get your head around it a little bit. And for me, it meant sitting down and getting creative. My husband and I sat at the table, we put everything out on the table. I was the primary breadwinner, and my husband works. I just was blessed to have a nice income, and we laid it out and said, we want to stay in the house if we can. How can we do that? And we both agreed that it was the best plan for me to leave work, and it meant getting creative. We rented out part of our house. We've gotten creative about how we finance trips. We put out kind of what were our baselines, and could we meet those needs other ways? And then over time, it's been 6 years since my diagnosis. I've qualified for Social Security disability, which helps. It's about a quarter of my income, my previous income. But it helps. And I think you have to weigh it. And I think you're absolutely right. If you make decisions, you quit your job, you check out of life, once you've gotten through the other side of the diagnosis, of the acceptance, it's hard to know what to go back to. And there's lots of things that I can still do. and lots of ways to explore. It's not all about making money. It's about being of service for me. It's about showing up. It's about trying to talk about joy and resilience despite a diagnosis. And that's how I define my worth now. It's not just about the paycheck. Although I miss catching babies. Delivering babies was wonderful, but it's somebody else's turn now. I don't want to drop any babies. I never dropped any babies, Parkinson's or no Parkinson's. So those are my thoughts.
I've noticed that people who reach a certain age like to translate things in a different way too. You just said you wanted to be of service. I would say we would all agree with that. That is such an important point. I think that's just big. And as a silver lining to add to your travel comment, you now have friends in every city. We have new friends in every city. So, yeah.
So true.
Yeah, I will say that this panel, all of you I've spoken to offline, I've talked to, you guys have been my saviors. And I hope that the Parkinson's community all reaches out to someone else, because they're not alone here. It's really daunting when you're looking forward, and someone said fear is the unknown, to think you're going at it alone. And I don't think you necessarily can count on your fellow colleagues and employees to be your best friend through all this. They tire, they fatigue over all these issues. They pick up your slack, and after a while, they sometimes will not be there. But I feel like any one of you, I could pick up the phone and call, and you would say, Kevin, I've been there, I get it, right? So I thank you all for that.
Kevin, that's a good segue into the next major bullet item, which is how to use your Parkinson's community to network and learn about second, third, and even fourth act careers, or what I call my twilight career. So thanks for kicking that off. Brad, you want to help us with that one?
Yeah, there's just one thing I wanted to share that is one of the things that keeps me going, talking about YOPD, in particular in employment. I did a study when I was at UK looking at, do people with Parkinson's disease want to work? Right? Because it was a question that needed to be asked. I'd done a lot of work with multiple sclerosis, which is, we're talking about a young age population who have employment impacted. And so I submitted this grant to the National Science Foundation. And all three reviewers who responded to my grant said, people with Parkinson's disease don't want to work.
No.
3 out of 3. And it blew me away, right? I mean, and I see laughing on the panel right now because you guys know that, but that's part of that is some sad truth. I have talked to movement disorder folks who believe the same vein. And part of it is saying, yeah, and the research I did found that 60% of the people I surveyed said, I want to work at least part-time. And for many, it wasn't just about the money. That's a component, clearly. But for many of them, it was about the social interaction, the getting out, being active, keeping moving, avoiding the apathy, which is a real issue with people with PD that we know about, right? So I just wanted to share that because I knew that those of you on this call would find that interesting. But thinking about the networking, right? And that's, as I listen to you all interact, those of you who have gone through that initial stage of the diagnosis, shock, fear, uncertainty, all of that. What do I do with my career? How do I move forward? It places you all in a very unique and good position to influence and guide those who you will come in contact with, who may be on this webinar right now saying, I was just diagnosed. What do I do? And, that's one of the great things when I think about support groups and what we know about most employment research in our country is that most jobs come from someone and someone who has connected you, this social capital, right, that we have through one another, and people who can guide you through this process. And talking about the B Corp companies, right, thinking about that, companies who have a different view of hiring people with disabilities is a big deal. And those companies are out there. You can find them. There are several who, when I was getting my graduate work done, we would help people get to those companies because we knew that they had a favorable view. And so I think, doing as much as one can to interact with someone else who has PD, asking those questions, telling someone when you're afraid, what you don't know how to do. How did you do that when you were going through? How did you talk to your employer when you explained those things, the needs that you have, right? And I know that in the short time that I've been interacting with you all in the last few days, clearly that's an important component, right? Watching you guys interact and talk about your work lives and about the changes that you encountered as a result of PD. So it's one of the things that I think is valuable, and it goes across whether one has a disability or chronic illness or not, right? This networking component with life and with understanding where we fit in life is extremely important. And, I'd be interested to hear how you all have used that, right? Use networking to answer some questions.
I think we probably network now more than we ever did pre-Parkinson's. And there's something which is pretty much the Parkinsons perspective, which is as you get towards acceptance, it's important for us to work because we want to maintain some kind of sense of normality, I think. But at the same time, less interest in the money side because we realise that isn't the important bit. You've already had the rug pulled away. You've had this huge bit of news. Now, money is not going to make that better. And yet with money and responsibility, there is the stress of that as well. I think Michael J. Fox said, didn't he, that he had to give up his day job to do his life's work.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely something about, I did it. I was doing what I did. I was doing the PR and marketing bit, but I didn't see the relevance of doing it for ordinary companies anymore. So doing it for my own charity, I see the point of that.
Very good.
May I also add that I work in a community outside of the Parkinson's community because I have a couple of different little jobs that I do. And it includes a lot of BIPOC people, which is Black, Indigenous, and people of color. And we often talk about how in networking, that's everything. Like all that the people that I interact with are saying is just invite us to the table. And if I may just make a parallel here, even though those two communities are nothing alike, with the disabled community or with people like us who have many disabilities that don't show, all we want is to be invited to the table. This is why my work with Anders in Norway and all the films we're doing are so important. We want the world to see that we're not all the same. We're not just that shaky image that you see if you Google Parkinson's anymore. We are a diverse community and we do have different skills that can be very useful. Because if you think about diversity in the workplace, it makes the company better in every single way by adding different views. And I don't know about you, but if I see two companies side by side competing and one of them hires a lot of people like me, I'm going to go give my money there. So.
And sometimes you have to just take the seat, Heather. Don't wait to be offered the seat at the table. Just go get it.
Yeah.
Steve, did you have something to add?
Steve had a comment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, going back to what Brad said, support. I was diagnosed 14 years ago, and there was not the support network at all like there is now. My situation was a little bit different, where I owned my business, and it was kind of my call as to when I thought the time was right to stop. I wish I had somebody to talk to. I really felt. This was before I met the Davis Phinney Foundation, and then my world changed, of course. But and I mean that seriously. As far as my Parkinson's world, I felt alone. I didn't know. Do I have 5 good years left? Do I have 10 good years left? I mean, can I do this for 2 more years? The responsibility of owning a company, running a company, having employees. So that was kind of like my angle was a little bit different. I wish there was somebody that I could have talked to back then, because I always wonder, did I sell my business too quickly? Because I remember when I did do it, and then I was working for the guy I sold the company to because for a 3-year transition during the buyout. I really had a hard time letting go, and I was doing, though I wasn't working as many hours, I almost wanted to keep working hard, so I still had it in me. So I guess it was having somebody to talk to on that end of it, or the end of it where you're you're employed and you're leaving. It's just so valuable to talk to somebody that's gone through it. I mean, it all worked out, great. And now where my purpose then was, running this business and having it be successful. My purpose now is doing all the volunteer work. I said, someday when I retire, I'm going to volunteer for this, and this. And now I'm doing it, and I do love it. But it all worked. But I just, to piggyback on what Brad said, I just really think having a network, not being afraid to reaching out to other people is so important.
Yeah, I just want to ask one question, because you all have very different situations that you're in right now in terms of your work day and your work schedule. Some of you work full time, some of you are not working. But I know one of the questions we often get, and that we've gotten in the chat, is having Parkinson's can feel like a full-time job, between the PT and the doctor and the exercise and the classes and all of those things. And then to work on top of it, it feels really overwhelming. So for those of you, who are working full-time and are taking in and doing classes and making sure you exercise every day, how are you doing it? What are some advice that you can offer to some people that are struggling with that? Yeah, Erin, go.
Yeah, I'll start it out. So I'm super type A and super competitive just in life in general. So the one thing that I had to do was get rid of guilt. So when I had to take a nap or take a half an hour to go for a bike ride, I had to stop feeling guilty that I wasn't doing work and oh my God, somebody's going to be looking for me and they can't find me and they're going to think I'm slacking, and just realizing it's okay. Nobody where I work now is judging me on that stuff. And I have to take care of myself first before I can take care of my company and or my clients and customers. So it was a hard thing for me to come to that conclusion. And, I still struggle with it here and there, but it's okay to take a break in the day and not be full on for 8 consecutive hours. And some days I may work 4 or 5 hours, some days I may work 12, but the end result is we're all adults. We all know what we're responsible for if we do have a job. And as long as you can get that work done, you just have to be okay with how you structure your day to get the end result.
Anybody else working out there?
I was just going to say that ultimately we are all in a very expensive war with our nervous system. And that includes, did I mention expensive? So the only reason I'm here in this home is because of my ex-husband. Most people can't do this, and especially not alone. It's very hard when you have a single income or no income suddenly to try to readjust and get that footing, let alone the philosophical things that I've mentioned and all the friend changes and the relationship changes and everything else. None of this is happening in a vacuum. It hits us from all directions at once. It really is like a Holocaust. And here we are holding up these little umbrellas going, we can do this, but without each other, we can't, because we learn everything from each other. So this is invaluable for sure. Thanks.
Yeah, I do think you have to think about sometimes the realities of downsizing or living a life a little bit different than what you lived before, pre-Parkinson's. I mean, I've had to adjust twice, and somehow every time I readjust, there's just a little bit of relief, like, oh, I don't have this huge mortgage now, or as each of my kids graduates from college, I get a raise, right? Those are the things that you kind of really look for, right? Are those midstream adjustments in our life? Yeah.
Thanks, Kevin. That's interesting, and I know all about those raises that you get periodically. So that was nice. Okay, there's 10 minutes left in the webinar, and there's really two things that I wanted to talk about or get on the table. One was what is it that you're doing today, panelist member? You know, what if you've made that transition? What exactly do you do today? What is your twilight career, your Act 2 or Act 4? And then I wanted Brad to comment about, you know, how to bring more meaning into that current role, not just with people that are working, but people that have made the change. There's purpose to bring meaning into that as well. So, Gaynor, if we want to start with you, what are you doing these days?
I'm doing this largely. So yeah, it was writing about another firm of accountants and doing their copy for their website was not going to sail my boat anymore. And yet it was screaming out that someone needed to represent young onset Parkinson's. So I launched the UK's only dedicated YOPD charity, and I think the only one in the Western world that's dedicated to YOPD. Although Davis Phinney does a fabulous job, obviously.
As I kind of go around my screen, I was in marketing as well. And what I've been doing since I left work 4 years ago is primarily this. My work as an ambassador with the Phinney Foundation, but I also run a bike ride on an annual fundraising bike ride on an annual basis. And then I do a lot of work for pedaling for Parkinson's, and some of you may know that, and helping that organization get established and become more prominent. And then there's a host of other things. I do some lobbying work for government. So I do a lot of things. I'm taken back by what Michael J. Fox said. I had to quit my day job to do my life's work. I kind of feel the same way. So Heather, I know you do a lot of different things.
Like improv. Hi. I feel like we have to be in improv, which is why I bring that up jokingly, but you know, there's truth in jest. There's no way to do this pre-planned because our world is constantly ending. We deal with so much grief and loss, and there's no way to calculate or anticipate some of that loss. It really is the end of our world. So I go into like Pema Chodron, the places that scare you, or when things fall apart, and I lean on some of my spiritual teachers because I don't know where to go, but without my comrades here, without the collective of the international Parkinson's community, I wouldn't have any answers because you only have about 15 minutes with your doctor a couple times a year if you're lucky. And we don't know where to go in our own communities. And if you've ever been to a local support group, you might find that they're mostly people who happen to be of a certain age that is not your age. So they're just in a different part of their lives. They're just not as interested. So this YOPD stuff is so vital for our success and for just surviving. You know, it's vital. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather. Kat, what are you doing?
Well, sometimes I feel I'm working harder than I was at the other job, but I have a little more control over it. I've started a podcast. I've written a book. I'm speaking internationally. I'm on a lot of committees. I try to be a good friend and resource for people, and I love it, and it's very meaningful for me.
And you get to take care of your grandkids.
I get to take care of my great niece. Every Tuesday is a Freya day. She comes and plays. She is 2, and man, she's 2. So, but it's a gift.
That says a lot right there. Erin?
Yeah, so pre-diagnosis, I was in sales. Post-diagnosis, other than this, took a career shift, and I'm a VP of Commerce Strategy for a global consulting firm with a focus on human-centered design and design thinking. I've been able and fortunate enough throughout my career to form a lot of lasting relationships. So I look at disabilities a little more broadly and leverage the relationship I had in the past with SAP, which is a big technology company for those of you who don't know, and was working with them to do the inclusivity for New York Fashion Week about 1.5 years ago for children who have, wheelchairs and things like that. And it was called Fashion for All. So getting involved in a bunch of different types of things that are more human-centric versus being a salesperson and being all about the money. So definitely a better fit.
Thanks, Erin. Steve, what are you doing?
Well, I'm doing as much as I can to help the Davis Phinney Foundation when they call on me. I'm also doing some for about 5 years now. I've been a mentor, a business mentor for small business through an organization called SCORE, which is a national organization. That keeps me pretty busy. I'm also on a committee in the town of Saratoga Springs, New York, we're about 40,000 folks, and the committee is on addressing racial equity and equality in the workplace with local business. So that's been keeping me busy, and then trying to get a workout in here and there.
And Kevin?
Well, I've sort of, during this transitionary period, I gained strength from taking calls from someone recently diagnosed with Parkinson's where I can offer advice or just sort of my experiences. Advice is a little bit rich to say, but I find that giving back in that way really helps me a lot. I also play a patient advisor to a number of organizations, which helps me again feel like I'm giving back to the cause right now, and helping our tribe. I think that to me is really, while I'm trying to still discover what's next, this is what's bridging me through all of that. And then the exercise takes a lot of time. I mean, between that and daily meditation, you find yourself, it's pretty soon it's 10 o'clock in the morning or 11, right?
Amy?
I'll be really quick. So my Zoom kicked me off. I'm assuming that you're asking what we are doing post-diagnosis that's more
Right.
meaningful. So I'll be really quick. Davis Phinney has been so helpful in this area, and just being an ambassador and having people call, like you said, Kevin, it feels good to be useful and to be a PD mentor for people. And that's what I've been doing. And also in the spring, I'm helping also through Davis Phinney administer, I guess. I'm not the one training, but we will have a trainer who is training anybody who's interested to do a triathlon in May. And I'm going to help him. His name is Frank. That'll be fun.
Yes, we are super excited about that. We're excited.
Yeah.
Mel, do we have time for Brad to put in some final thoughts?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and then we have a guest again today. So Brad, you wanna wrap up with some important final thoughts?
Very quick, yes. One of the things that I saw when we started talking about this was talking about meaningful work, right? What does that mean? That's become a real a construct that's being studied in the social sciences right now. And the question is, how do we define that, right? What is meaningful work? And clearly it's a subjective thing, right? But Michael Steger is a guy from Colorado State University who's been studying meaning in life and meaningful work for the last decade, and probably is the foremost expert. And he talks about it being any paid or unpaid occupational role that gives us meaning, purpose, and significance in our life. And, it helps when we are our authentic selves, when it increases our self-esteem, we have purpose, we feel belonging, and it transcends who we are as a person and it helps us have a greater cause. So that's kind of the real brief picture of that, but it's an area of great importance.
Thanks, Brad. I can't thank you enough. It's been a pleasure meeting you and working with you on this. And I'm going to kick it back over to Mel. It looks like she just ran out to get our invited guest in here. Oh, who would it be? Davis, how are you?
People, you guys are so great. Thank you so much. So much wisdom and thoughtfulness. And Brad, it's great to have you as part of the conversation today. So thank you all. It's great to see you. And Gaynor, thanks for your shout out.
You're welcome.
But
Great to see you, Davis. Thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Yeah, definitely.
For sure.
I mean, it's really Mel and Polly and the whole team out here at the foundation that do the heavy lifting. I just come in as the frosting occasionally, but anyway, you guys are terrific. Thanks so much.
Thank you for getting me out of my fuzzy blue robe and my slippers. You're the only reason that I'm out of my blue robe. I appreciate that part, especially.
Anytime, Heather. Anytime. But
Heather, are you wearing your slippers now?
you might have to take, there you go. That's
So
awesome.
be comfortable. You got it. Well, thanks everybody. I'm not sure if Mel's going to come back in or not, but
Yeah, I'll be here. I am. Okay.
okay.
Thank you to everybody who joined us today. Davis, thank you for joining.
Thank you, Davis.
If you're on
Davis,
this
thanks for
call,
popping in.
it means that you're going to get the recording of the video and the audio and the transcript and everything that you need. And we'll be back next month, as always, the third Thursday of the month at 1 o'clock every time. And if you guys have ideas for something that you would like this YOPD Council to talk about, you can definitely email them to me at this address. I can't do it and talk at the same time. Can't multitask that one. So mdzon@dpf.org if you have some topics you'd like us to talk about. We will do that. Thank you all so much for being here. And thank you for this council for just bringing so much energy and life and, a spotlight, as Gaynor would say, onto YOPD. It's very necessary. So thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Everybody.